It's The Wizard of Oz for the children of the 80s, but this time with a lot more puppets, a lot more David Bowie, and a lot more of David Bowie's crotch bulge. The first movie to feature a computer-generated animal, and the last movie directed by Jim Henson before he died. Hi, I'm Dan Larson, and this is the history of Labyrinth. Labyrinth is a 1986 feature film produced by George Lucas and directed by Jim Henson, based on concept art by Brian Froud. It's a coming-of-age story about a teenage girl trading her baby brother for a 13-hour game of hide-and-seek with David Bowie.
That's pretty freaky, Bowie.
Sarah is a young girl walking the line between the freedom and protection of being a child and the responsibility of becoming an adult. Easily lost in her own imagination, she quickly loses her temper when asked by her stepmother to babysit her infant brother, Toby. Unprepared or unwilling to deal with the responsibility placed upon her, she calls out to forces from beyond to deliver her from the hell of staying in on a Friday night, changing diapers, and cleaning up baby barf. I wish the goblins would come and take you away right now. To her surprise, the forces from beyond grant her wish. Toby is taken away by goblins, and Jareth, the beautiful, handsome Goblin King himself. What's said is said, and now Sarah must play the game. She has only 13 hours to find and reclaim her younger brother Toby before he is turned into a goblin as well. Easier said than done, as she must solve a sprawling puzzle made of puzzles, a giant maze with the Goblin King's castle sitting at the center, a treacherous journey fraught with danger and characters who would delight at watching her fail, or worse, perish herself. She doesn't have to do it alone, though. There are others that seek to spoil the Goblin King's plans or at least redeem themselves from their own misdeeds. They can help her and she can help them. Together they can make the journey. Her brother's life, her future, her happiness, all are lost if she cannot find her way through the labyrinth. Thank you to 80stees.com for sponsoring this video. Click the link in the description below and use code TOYGALAXY to get 30% off your order today. What's the first thing that pops into your head when I say the 1980s or the 1990s? Don't think about it, just say it. 1, 2, 3, Rubik's Cube. Yes, they have that, or they had that, or they will have that. 80stees.com is constantly refreshing their inventory with officially licensed t-shirts featuring characters, quotes, and logos from cartoons, comics, TV shows, movies, wrestling, and music from the 1970s through the 2000s. So while I can't guarantee that everything you can think of will be in stock, I can guarantee that you'll always be surprised by the range of their selection. 80stees.com has something for everyone. Your favorite heroes like Batman, Spider-Man, Mega Man, Deadpool, and Wolverine, Voltron, both Lion and Vehicle, Star Wars, Stargate, old and older Battlestar Galactica, Motley Crue, Biz Markie, Pink Floyd, and Jimi Hendrix. Find the shirt that's right for you, the one that speaks to your interests, and lets the world know that there's no bigger fan of scratch and sniff stickers, Spam, or Kellogg's Fruit Loops than you. And you can prove it because you're wearing the shirt. Click the link below and use code TOYGALAXY for 30% off your order today. Again, that's code TOYGALAXY for 30% off your order. And thanks again to 80stees.com. Jim Henson began working with puppets as a form of artistic expression in the 1950s when he was in his teens, which quickly led to the founding of Muppets Incorporated with his wife Jane in 1958. In the 1960s, he expanded the visibility of the Muppets brand through talk show appearances and a ton of commercials, capped off with their inclusion as a foundational element of Sesame Street in 1969. In the 70s, Henson began experimenting with writing and directing short films while making sure that the Muppets didn't get typecast as kids' entertainment through regular segments on Saturday Night Live called The Land of Gorch. In 1974, The Muppets Valentine Show acted as a pilot for a Muppets television series. A second pilot, The Muppet Show Sex and Violence, followed in 1975, and in 1976, The Muppet Show officially began airing as a regular weekly series. In 1979, The Muppets made the leap to the big screen with The Muppet Movie, a critical and commercial success. In 1981, Henson made the shift to movies permanent, ending The Muppet Show after 5 seasons. At the same time, he made his feature film directorial debut on The Great Muppet Caper. Henson's next challenge was to tell an engaging big screen story using only puppets and animatronic characters, something rarely attempted in feature filmmaking and even more rarely successfully. The result was The Dark Crystal, a science fiction fantasy epic with concept art by New York Times best-selling illustrator Brian Froud. It was a stunning visual effects exhibition that fulfilled Henson's desire to infuse his storytelling with the darkness of Grimm's fairy tales. The Dark Crystal was scary. On purpose. It didn't feature a single visible human actor on screen on purpose. And those combined elements contributed to its underperformance at the box office. Still, it was the culmination of everything Henson and his team had worked toward for decades, the legitimization of the art form as a mainstream storytelling medium. Upon completion, Henson was ready to build on what they had learned. After a promotional screening of The Dark Crystal in 1982, Henson asked concept artist Brian Froud if he was interested in working on another project. Despite his intention to move on from filmmaking, Froud agreed to a second round. In a 1986 article in Starlog magazine, Henson said that after The Dark Crystal, he wanted to do a lighter weight picture with more of a sense of comedy since Dark Crystal got kinda heavy, heavier than we had intended. Now he wanted to do a film with characters having more personality and interacting more interrelationship scenes because those are the kinds of scenes that our creatures and puppets do best. Henson wanted this new movie to lean back into one of the things that always made the Muppets more relatable and, ironically, more believable, co-starring with human characters. After kicking around some ideas related to Indian mythology, Froud had a vision of goblins, specifically a human baby surrounded by goblins. According to Froud, quote, "I thought that would look really striking. In European fairy tales, that's what goblins do. They steal babies. I painted a picture of a baby surrounded by goblins and then continued to paint other conceptual things, just ideas for characters, and the story developed from there." A story that went through several iterations and several writers. Dennis Lee, who polished the dialogue on The Dark Crystal, was first in line. While Lee wrote, Froud got to work producing concept art. Henson, Froud, and Lee worked together for about a year. A poet by profession, Lee wrote a short novella with a general outline and key plot points that could be boiled down to a young girl going through the labyrinth to rescue her baby brother. It was Froud who suggested the idea of a labyrinth as the setting for the film as both a metaphorical setting and a literal setting. After Lee's novella was completed, Henson wanted someone with more screenwriting and humor experience to write the actual screenplay. Terry Jones, previously of Monty Python's Flying Circus, had just completed a children's book called The Saga of Eric the Viking. Henson's daughter Lisa had read the book and suggested they reach out to him. Jones was given Lee's poetic novella as a starting point for the script, but Jones wasn't particularly engaged by what Lee had written. He discarded nearly everything in it and wrote his own story based on the conceptual art that Froud had produced over the course of the previous year.
I sat at my desk with Brian's drawings stacked on one side of the desk and writing away to see what would happen. And every time I came to a new scene and I needed something to happen, I looked through Brian's drawings and found a character who was kind of speaking to me already, and suddenly there was the scene.
But that wasn't what Henson wanted. In Jones's version, Sarah didn't make it to the Goblin King's castle until the very end of the movie, keeping Jareth, the Goblin King himself, a secret climactic reveal just like the wizard in The Wizard of Oz. For Henson, it was important to feature Jareth since he had already had a verbal agreement from David Bowie to star in the film.
They think it's pretty cool now.
See, the Goblin King was originally a goblin like all the other goblins, but over the course of the development it changed from a goblin to a human, with Henson considering actors like Simon McCorkindale and Kevin Kline. But the Muppet Show and Muppet Movie had always had success teaming up with popular entertainers, so a human evolved into a pop musician. After considering such stars as Prince, Michael Jackson, and Sting, Henson got in touch with Bowie during his 1983 world tour to gauge his interest.
He first brought me the concept on the 1983 tour that I did in America, and asked me if I'd consider doing the part. And he showed me Brian Froud's artwork, and he showed me a copy of The Dark Crystal, which I found a fascinating piece of work. And I could see the potentiality of making that kind of movie with humans, with songs, with a more of a lighter comedy script.
Jones had to completely restructure his script to allow for scenes featuring musical numbers, but it still wasn't exactly what Henson was looking for. Over the next year, the script bounced around from Terry Jones to Jim Henson to writer Elaine May to executive producer George Lucas and another writer, Laura Phillips. Nearly 25 different versions were produced over a 2-year period from 1983 to 1985, each new version shared with Bowie, who nearly left the project due to a lack of humor in the script. After all that, Henson brought Jones back in to restore the humor that Bowie was looking for, lost through the dozens of previous drafts. Finally, just a few weeks before shooting began, David Bowie officially signed on to play Jareth and compose original songs for the soundtrack.
You freaky old bastard, you.
George Lucas described Jareth as the devil. He said Jareth is, quote, completely alluring, completely a character that draws people in, that people are infatuated with. Froud insists that all of the costume choices he made were done with projecting male sexuality. Froud said Jareth is a romantic hero. He's contemporary with a leather jacket that has armor on it. This refers to 15th century knights. I gave him a swagger stick. It has a crystal ball, but if you look at it, it's a microphone. He's supposed to be a young girl's dream of a rock star.
Jim Henson, creator of the Muppets, and George Lucas, creator of Star Wars, take you on a dazzling adventure.
There's nothing to be afraid of.
Turn back, Sarah, before it's too late. She must be stopped.
Labyrinth, rated PG, starts Friday at a specially selected theater near you.
Sarah, the young girl going through the labyrinth to save her baby brother, evolved from an actual princess from the fantasy world where the labyrinth was located in early versions of the script to a regular human girl from our modern 1986 world in the shooting script. Making her a real human from the real world made her more relatable to a larger audience as a character, and the bridge to the fantasy realm seemed that much closer. She's a teenager because Henson wanted to create an allegory for growing up. As he imagined it, Labyrinth was about, quote, the growing up process of maturity, working with the idea of a young girl right at the point between girl and woman, shedding her childhood thoughts for adult thoughts. Specifically, I wanted to make the idea of taking responsibility for one's life, which is one of the neat realizations a teenager experiences, a central thought of the film. In an attempt to avoid the child labor limitations, they auditioned actors who were at least 18 years old. Helena Bonham Carter, Jane Krakowski, Ali Sheedy, Mia Sarah, Sarah Jessica Parker, Laura Dern, Marissa Tomei, all auditioned, but none embodied the character for Henson or Lucas. Once they expanded the search to younger actors, they found Jennifer Connelly, and Henson knew immediately that they had found their Sarah.
I sort of wanted to be a vet, or I wanted to be a carpenter or something. I didn't know what I wanted to be, but I never thought of being in films. So I just really started with modeling because friends of my parents asked me if I wanted to. Then I started doing commercials. Then I went on a film audition, which was for Once Upon a Time in America. I think it was my first one, actually. I don't know, it just sort of happened.
I found I could talk very straight to her. We'd talk about her performance. I didn't have to tiptoe around her feelings or anything like that. She could talk, just as an adult.
Other members of the cast included concept artist Brian Froud's own child Toby as Sarah's younger brother Toby. A total coincidence that he was not only the perfect age to play Toby during the shoot, but also that he looked exactly like Froud's concept art created before Toby was created. Sarah's mom was played by Shelley Thompson, but was originally going to be played by Gates McFadden. Yes, that Gates McFadden. Unfortunately, McFadden was also hired as the choreographer for the film, and according to union rules, couldn't do both. She's listed in the credits with her actual first name as Cheryl McFadden. And then, of course, the various goblins, monsters, minions, worms, and talking stone golems were portrayed by longtime Henson performers like Frank Oz, Dave Gells, Karen Prell, Rob Mills, Kevin Clash, and dozens of other puppeteers. As well as Henson's adult children Brian and Cheryl, Michael Motion doubled as David Bowie's hands whenever Jareth needed to juggle his balls. What? What's funny? Labyrinth was shot over 5 months at the world-famous Elstree Studios in England, the same studio where The Muppet Show, The Great Muppet Caper, Dark Crystal, Indiana Jones, parts of Star Wars, Empire Strikes Back, and Return of the Jedi were shot. It was a complicated and difficult shoot because, as the old Hollywood saying goes, you should never work with babies, puppets, or animals. And this film has all three. Henson was obviously comfortable with puppets, and he had worked with animals, but this was his first time working with a baby, and the first time working with all three at the same time. Some scenes required dozens of puppeteers with rigging and remote controls, powering facial expressions, animals, the baby, a musical performance, all on the set working together at the same time. While the film was edited by John Grover, Henson was directly involved, as was executive producer George Lucas. According to Henson, he and Lucas made a great collaborative partnership, trading the film back and forth. Where Henson tended to allow for more breathing room on significant moments or lines of dialogue, Lucas was ruthless in his ability to focus in on action. As Henson described it, quote, "I loosen up his tightness and he tightens my looseness."
This is probably too much tuna.
The opening title sequence marked a milestone in film and animation history. The owl swooping about is the first fully computer-generated creature featured in a film. It was created by Digital Productions, who had previously worked on computer-generated sequences for movies like Ice Pirates and The Last Starfighter. Trevor Jones composed the original score while David Bowie recorded 5 new songs. He performed the songs Underground, Magic Dance, As the World Falls Down, and Within You, while Chilly Down was performed by the actors voicing the Fireys. That said, a demo version of Chilly Down with Bowie's vocals was leaked shortly after his death in 2016. Underground was the lead single from the soundtrack. A music video featuring David Bowie stumbling into the labyrinth was directed by Steve Barron, who would go on to direct Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles the movie just a few years later. Promotion for the release of Labyrinth included a full range of licensed merchandise. There was a novelization of the film by A.C.H. Smith. Dankin released a series of plush dolls, coloring, activity, and sticker books, puzzles, games, Halloween costumes, party supplies, lunchboxes, and a whole lot more. Labyrinth opened on the weekend of June 27, 1986. It was the 8th highest grossing film, right behind Ferris Bueller's Day Off, Top Gun, Running Scared, Ruthless People, Legal Eagles, Back to School, and Karate Kid Part 2 at number 1. Adjusted for 2024 dollars, the $24 million budget would be closer to $100 million today. With that kind of money, talent, and resume, 8th place was a crushing disappointment for everyone involved, especially Jim Henson.
Of course, there's David Bowie in it, and there's his music, so that'll attract also all the teenagers and all the music lovers and everything.
By the end of Labyrinth's run in US theaters, it had only made back about half of its $24 million production budget. International releases brought its final total to around $34 million, essentially breaking even once the marketing budget is taken into account. Critics recognized the incredible craft and artistry that were put into the film, but ultimately seized on the story and performances, which some felt betrayed that craft and artistry. While Roger Ebert opined a lack of any consequences for Sarah, Gene Siskel said the story was pathetic. The use of a baby in peril was a betrayal of the goodwill built up by his years on Sesame Street, and compared Frau's visual concepts to the grotesque Garbage Pail Kids. In the Miami Herald, Laurie Horn felt like the inevitable had finally occurred and Henson had become overwhelmed by the technology of the puppets and thus losing sight of the story he was supposed to be telling. She cautioned that small children might be confused or worse, terrified by the weird array of hairy monsters, grabbing hands, swooping owls, and sinister dungeons. After pouring his heart and soul into Labyrinth, Jim Henson was shocked by the negative response. It was unfathomable to him that it had been received so poorly by critics and that audiences hadn't made more of an effort to see it. He retreated back to television production, and while he may not have intended for Labyrinth to be the last film he directed, his death just a few years later in 1990 made it so. He didn't live long enough to see how truly beloved the film became nearly 40 years later. But his son Brian has said that the tide began to turn as it was released on home video and replayed on the Disney Channel before Jim passed, and that he was able to see all that and know that it was appreciated. In the decades since its release, Labyrinth has become more than a cult classic. It is beloved and therefore has had several licensing and reboot opportunities since. In 2006, Tokyopop released a 4-part manga sequel called Return to Labyrinth, set 15 years after the movie. In 2007, NECA produced Jareth in both 6 and 12 inches, followed by a 2-pack of Jareth and Hoggle in 2008. McFarlane Toys revisited the franchise in 2017. There are Labyrinth Funko Pops, prop replicas, leave that in! I don't think I'm gonna get through it on another take. We should just pick it up from right here. Life-size busts, Labyrinth Clue, and while I didn't confirm it, I'm sure someone is selling a set of glass juggling balls.
I'm leaving it all.
Labyrinth clothing has been a not insignificant portion of Hot Topics business since the early 2000s. You can buy this shirt right now on 80stees.com. There have been door knockers, statues, new plush dolls from Toy Vault, and a really fucked up looking Ludo costume on Amazon. In 2016, Guardians of the Galaxy writer Nicole Perlman announced she was going to be writing a Labyrinth sequel. 4 years later, in 2020, Doctor Strange writer Scott Derrickson announced that he was going to be directing a sequel. Brian Henson was going to executive produce with his sister Lisa. In 2021, Jennifer Connelly mentioned that she had some conversations about a sequel, but had no other information. And earlier this year, in February of 2024, Brian Henson confirmed that they were still working on it, but had nothing new to announce. Lisa Henson said they haven't been able to get the script right. Echoing the script writing process on the original, they have decided to start over again. New script, new director, nothing happening anytime soon. Even if a sequel never happens, it won't change the fact that Labyrinth was an incredible technological achievement by a team of uniquely talented artists and engineers guided by a visionary creator at the height of his craft. A fantastic adventure that introduced the world to a new kind of villain and a journey of self-discovery through one teenage girl's imagination and the labyrinth she created. It's funny because I didn't think there were any jokes in this episode. Thanks for watching. Please hit like, hit subscribe if you're not already a subscriber. Thank you very much to those of you who already are. If you're in the position to help the channel grow, please visit our Patreon at patreon.com/toygalaxy. Several different tiers to address your specific Secret Galaxy content needs. Check out our new Secret Galaxy merch shop at secretgalaxy.shop. All merchandise is physically in stock and ready to ship. Links to all of this in the description below, and let us know in the comments down below when you first saw Labyrinth. For years, I had neglected to see either Labyrinth or Legend, so I wasn't really sure which was which. At this point, I've seen Labyrinth many times, so I know what Legend isn't. That said, and I know this doesn't help my reputation as a guy who hasn't seen movies, but Legend is on my list, and I will get to it very soon. Just gonna watch Top Gun a few more times first.
Hey, same guy.
That's right.
Cut.
I knew that.